If you ever get some time that in the day to do some leisurely reading, might I suggest the Lewis Powell Memo. It's been talked about a lot over the years, but to read this memo, you get an understanding of why things are so screwed up in our political world, if hell, our society today. And why this hearing with Amy Coney Barrett is such a damned farce. I mean, she's clearly not qualified enough to sit on the high court, but she's a Federalist Society hack. And that seems to be the only real qualification that she's got. But, and of course, as I mentioned previously, talked about the Sheldon Whitehouse presentation, the goal for the Federalist Society and their corporate dark money donors and such is not so much overturning Obergefell or Roe v. Wade or Obamacare. It's about severely limiting civil suits against corporations and getting rid of federal regulations so businesses can make more money. That's the Koch agenda. But anyway, to understand how we got to this point, it's real important to look at this memo. And I got this copy via Greenpeace, but it's out there on various sites. But it was a 1971 memo from Lewis Powell to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the chairman, about what needs to be done to reverse the disastrous course the so-called left created. And of course, back then in 1971, there was still a political left, thanks to the civil rights movements and the anti-war protesters. And of course, as we know, especially if you lived through the time, that there was lots of violence. We talk about the violence here. It was nothing compared to the 1960s. And culminating, especially the student protests, culminating in Kent State, which was in 1970. So Lewis Powell got really upset over this state of affairs, and he decided to write a memo on what should be done by corporate America to reverse this disastrous leftist takeover. And when I first heard about the Powell Memo and who wrote it, I was shocked that it was Lewis Powell of all people. I remember him mostly as being appointed justice to the Supreme Court not long after this was written by Richard Nixon. And yeah, he had pro-business tendencies, but he wasn't really a rabid right-winger. He was praised because he tried to be see all sides of the issue. He was kind of middle of the road. And he was a crucial swing vote. Sometimes he would he would vote conservative, like the infamous Bowers versus Hardwick decision back in 1986, I think it was, which upheld the Georgia sodomy law, but it was later overturned, I think, by the Lawrence decision. And then, I think it was Lawrence versus Texas. I don't want to look it up, but that's the decision that overturned Bowers. And then, but then, on the other hand, he was in the majority that voted in favor of getting rid of restrictive abortion laws. In other words, he was on the majority ruling in Roe v. Wade. So he was kind of all over the map. But anyway, he wrote this long memo, 8 pages, so it's not that long. But he described the alleged assault of the free enterprise system by the left, and so he went into the sources. And of course, you can't have that, especially in the media and in the university. And he had suggestions on what should be done about it, and what the Chamber of Commerce could do, what corporations could do. First, could get more foothold in the campuses, get more foothold in the media, especially like then with the campuses, especially schools and businesses. That's a big one for neoliberal propaganda now. And then the media like television, the journals, and then the political arena, and then of course form the think tanks. And the think tanks are almost directly an offshoot of this memo. But finally, he talks about the courts. And he says, the American business and enterprise system have been affected as much by the courts as by the executive and legislative branches of government. Under our constitutional system, especially with an activist-minded Supreme Court, the judiciary may be the most important instrument for social, economic, and political change. And this was a guy who voted in favor of Roe v. Wade later on. But anyway, I thought, okay, if you really want to complain about how our screwed up, I complain about our screwed up political system, I believe reading this is important to understand how we got so messed up. So I thought I'd share the Powell Memo.